is a hopefully relatively short video about completing the Reflection on Practice Learning assignment for the first year apprenticeships. Now, I'm mainly making this for the apprentices, but I'll be sending out the link to mentors and other people as well. But bear in mind, if you're not an apprentice, that's who the audience is. I'm sure you can translate that. So what I hope to do is to review the reflection and practice assignment and just do a little bit, not very much, but a little bit about models of reflection, because this is what we do in social work. It's quite often breakneck speed, do the assignment, do the assessment, do the visit, do the discharge, whatever it happens to be. But every so often we just need to pause and break, particularly where we're dealing with complex situations where there isn't an easy or simple answer. And in those situations, one of the things that helps is reflecting ourselves on whatever the experience might happen to be, or reflecting with others and seeking support and advice. So for this particular assignment, the draft is due on the 28th of April. If you recall, draft or formative assignments, if you don't get it in on the 28th, it is not the end of the world. There will be a little bit of flexibility about that. My advice will be, don't go much more than 2 weeks after that date. I will feedback, etc., and of course, full details are on the assignment tab. The link is there also, but you know where to find it on Canvas. So what is this about? Well, if you go on Canvas, this is what you see. This is the first reflection and practice learning on your course, and it will be 1,000 words. That's 1,000 words of text, doesn't include the list of references that you're going to be asked to add to it. So generally in the university, just get into the habit of submitting drafts and get feedback from module leaders, because that will help improve your work and improve your grades. So if you try to get it in around the 28th, that means you have a bit of time to work on it a bit more before you submit this as part of your final portfolio in June. So you write this in the first person, I did, I thought, I watched, etc., and you have to support this with references, textbooks, academic articles and research, and provide a list of those things. You're also going to have to cross-reference to the relevant professional standards, and in this instance, that's the apprenticeship or IATE standards and the PCF at the readiness for direct practice level. Now, there's another video about those standards, which I sent out, I think about a week or two ago. Excuse me. So you can have a look at that if you want further guidance. Also, there are a number of exemplars, work that people have done in previous years, and I think they will be useful to you. For me, I like to see a concrete example of how a thing is done. I find that helps me enormously if I have work to do. So have a go. So what should you talk about? Well, there has to be some evidence of work with a person or a family with lived experience social work. So you can think about or reflect on different aspects of your practice and in particular your development. What has changed over the past year or so? It's okay to write about the direct observation if you have been observed in your practice or maybe the assessed interview and so on. That might narrow opportunities for reflection on your practice. So I'm sure there's probably going to have been a couple of standout moments in the last year or so. Maybe you did something a little bit different for a change. So these prompt questions, a list of questions, you don't have to go through them and answer each one, but they're kind of, I suppose, they're to start you thinking about this, and so they might be useful. So what has helped your learning? What particular things stood out for you? Perhaps in class, perhaps on the job. Did you use supervision to enable you to develop as a practitioner? I'm still using supervision. I've been doing this for a very long time. Just The act of talking and sharing with another person clarifies what I think and feel about things. What are your areas of strengths? And perhaps where do you need to develop a little bit more? What you did well surprised or shocked you? Don't forget, what you did well is entirely viable topic to write about in an assignment. It doesn't always have to be where things went wrong. Sometimes we learn a lot from when things went wrong, but we could also focus on positive or good practice. Maybe your own previous work or personal experience might have raised a few issues for you in the first year. And if so, perhaps this would be a good opportunity to kind of articulate those a little bit. You might have had feedback from a university tutor, mentor, other people, your team manager, whoever it might be, or indeed your colleagues or other people on your course. And of course, it would be good to see something about your values and thinking about personal or ethical dilemmas. That's just a flavor of the kind of things that you might ask yourself as a way of preparing for the essay. Now, of course, there are criteria, and I am going to go through the 4 of these in some detail. This is exactly, more or less exactly what you will see on Canvas. So I'm not going to read them out now, but I am going to go through the 4 of them in some detail. And I thought I would add this. Now, of course, you're all apprentices, and apprenticeship program's relatively new. It's only been around a few years, really. And somebody has written quite an interesting article about this, Stoneman Worsley. And the title is It's My Time Now. And I kind of think some of you might kind of, I don't know, chime with that a little bit. Kind of, some people have been waiting a little while to have this opportunity. But it also covers a lot of other kind of topics. Funnily enough, their apprenticeship program is quite similar in some ways to how ours is structured. So I kind of think this might be helpful. So have a look. Links on Canvas also, etc., etc. So back to the pause or the break. So what do we mean by reflection and practice learning? And obviously practice learning is on-the-job learning. But practice learning might also happen in the class, or the two things might interconnect in ways. So let's then move on to reflection. It seems kind of obvious. People talk about it a lot in social work. There are lots of different models here. I've just done Dewey, Borton, Schoen, Kolb, Gibbs, Greenaway. There are many more. Now, you did get a session on this in your first module, Transitions into Social Work, and I put a little link there. Go back into 411 and have a look and see if any of those models might be useful to you or jog your memory in some way, shape, or form. So there's materials already available that we have covered that might be helpful. So I did say I would do those 4 criteria. So let's have a little look. So the first one, critical evaluation of learning development. So that really means that the submission should be reflective rather than descriptive. Not, I went into class and I learned about a model. I met a person in their home. That's fine as a starting point, but really it doesn't get where we need to be in terms of reflection. Reflection really prompts us to examine our own practice and improve it. And you kind of think, well, why do we go on about this reflection business all the time? Because it does help with our own self-awareness, creative answers to difficulties. You know, a lot of the time in social work, you know what you're doing, you know what you have to do, but there are many times when it just seems very complex. You don't know where to begin. This is where reflection helps ourselves, in particular if we do it with other people. That helps you enhance your problem-solving skills, also your ability to evaluate situations and to plan for the future and success. Sometimes it can be a bit uncomfortable. We all have bias and the potential for discrimination. These are social facts, social things, and we grow up in a society. So it'd be kind of unusual if, in a way, that we didn't have some of those biases and discrimination. But we can move past them by recognizing them and doing something different. Reflection helps us make the best use of the knowledge available. It's not very well and good in reading a textbook, reading an academic article, the process of reflection helps us to link that to the real world and to our practice. And of course, that's, I suppose, part of challenging and developing the existing professional knowledge base. Perhaps that's a higher level of reflection. But it also helps us avoid mistakes. And if we find ourselves particularly in the same patterns of behavior that seem to crop up a fair few times, um, it's not an uncommon experience. Perhaps that helps us kind of articulate different ways of doing things. And of course, it's all about maximizing our opportunities for learning. So the other part of that criteria was a bit about description and analysis. So the description is fine. Be wary of just kind of writing long and he said and then she said, etc., 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 because that's not really getting at the meaning of situations. So there's a bit of a judgment call to be made about what's relevant and significant detail and how much detail do I need to give to the reader so they can understand what's going on. Sometimes that means we have to kind of reread, rewrite, and edit so we get to kind of a clear, concise, and well-structured description. And it should actually be objective rather than emotional. So it says here, thoughts and feelings are recorded rather than coloring the account. Really what that means is it's fine to talk about your feelings. Those are very important, right? Um, but we're kind of looking at our feelings and kind of saying, how did this play out? What do I feel about it now? What can that tell me about my understanding of the situation? So analysis tries to kind of get at a deeper level, essentially, breaking things down. Sometimes you have to slow things down to see what's actually happening. And it helps to identify positive, negatives, etc., challenging assumptions, so on and so forth. In particular, we like to see you link to external sources, theory, research. Somebody is definitely watching this video and saying, Dermot, how many references do I need? In the same way as they say in the index of evidence, how many examples do I need? Well, that's a bit of a how long is a piece of string question. But for 1,000 words, I'd want to see 5 or 10 references, and I prefer to see 10 than 5, if you see what I mean. Some of them might be PCF, but I would want to be seeing actual articles and books rather than professional standards, if you see what I mean. Anyway, if you get feedback, oh, look, recognition of feedback from others. If you get feedback on the assignment, I'll give you a steer on the work that is submitted. So again, this is kind of fairly simple, but really you should make some reference to how you used supervision or feedback, and it can be formal or informal from a range of different people. You don't have to list all the people, but show that you talked about it with somebody else. You just didn't just keep it to yourself, basically. And sometimes that feedback will come from the people that we're working with. Sometimes that's really rewarding and encouraging, and sometimes it's a bit of a challenge, isn't it? But talk about that a little bit. And again, we did address this in your initial module 4011. And I believe it is session 10 that talks about supervision, and it tries to consider supervision in the widest possible way. It's not always just about formal supervision with a line manager or perhaps a mentor or somebody else. It's also something which we learn about over time. It's something you have to work at. So you learn how to be a supervisee as much as you do to be a supervisor. Yes, I think the slide speaks for itself. It's that idea that we get better at it over time, and the more we use it, and the more we practice it. Criteria 3, well, this is about references and citations. Now, it's quite a struggle, really, to get this right in the first year. Do you know what I mean? You have 3 years to develop these skills and work on them. And I definitely will give you feedback on that when you do your draft. Similarly, not only does it have to have those references, citations, it should be kind of concisely written, not too many grammatical errors, typos, things of this nature. It should be relatively well presented, so it looks reasonable, basically. I mean, I think that's fairly straightforward, even though I anticipate a lot of the feedback will be around the referencing and citations. You should also reference the professional standards. Obviously, here it's IATE and the PCF. Now, I would again advise you to go and look at the portfolios where the reflections are contained, usually in the assignment tab. Maybe you'll find a few more as examples so you can see a range of things. People approach this in very different ways, you know. Very commonly, people have a little column down the side and they have the little references to the professional standards there. That works very well. It's a pretty straightforward way to kind of organize your work, but people have done slightly different things. So again, feedback will be a good way to find out if you are on track. So what are the standards? Well, I suppose I'm asking you to kind of, you might refer to all of the standards in your essay or kind of a selection of them. But of course, for us, the PCF is quite important here because it is about reflective practice, isn't it? And in particular, PCF 6. So I'm just putting that up there for reference. You might go and have a little look at that and say, what did they ask us to do as social worker? And indeed, what do they ask in terms of the IATE standards? So I'm not going to read these out in detail, it's far too tedious, but have a look at the slides and kind of think, okay, are these giving me hints and tips and the direction I might be going? But really, having said all of this, this is about you. These essays are quite personal and individual. In some senses, there's not really a right or wrong way. There's a you way of doing this. So allow yourself a little bit of time to think about it. In particular, celebrate your success for coming this far. It's not the easiest journey in the world, but it's a worthwhile one. It kind of changes your life. But if I was thinking about you, then, well, we found that people tend to pick a couple of different options. Other versions are available, but a lot of the time it's either overall learning or a critical incident, and I'll explain what I mean by this. So overall learning is simply, okay, started in September and here I am now. What's different? What's changed? What kind of surprises were there? What was rewarding? What were those moments where I kind of wasn't feeling too great? And perhaps consider also what did other people see or say? My guess is some people will say, well, they didn't see me at all, Dermot, because I just hid away in the room with my laptop. Okay. Do you remember to have a little bit of time for yourself? It's not all about studying and work, is it? You count too. And I suppose really, you hear a lot of noise these days. Oh, let's do a 60-hour week. And you kind of do not do a 60-hour week. By the time you get to 45 or 50 years, you were less effective and efficient than you were at 35 or 40. We need rest, relaxation, recuperation to be able to perform at our best. So that might be the big picture. But sometimes people do this. A critical incident, like something important happened to you and it stuck with you and it gave you a lot of pause for thought and you really learned something from it. I kind of, in my experience, most social workers who've been in training education will have had one of those moments somewhere along the line, quite often in the early career, but you might have a number of them over time. And so critical incident tells us about ourselves, our organizations, our processes, or whatever. And Lister, there's a little chapter there which you can actually get in your reading list if you want to read more, because kind of make suggestions how you might structure it. Some of them are not dramatic. They don't have to be a big thing. Sometimes it's a very small thing that only you know when you experience. Do you know what I mean? But it just because it's not seen, and apparently it's a little thing, that doesn't undermine its importance. Because, as I said, this is about you. And my last note, feedback works. Get used to asking for feedback on your academic work and indeed your work in practice in the real world, in the workplace, because it genuinely does drive you forward. Do you know what I mean? Every opportunity for feedback is an opportunity to do better. And sometimes just to have confirmation of how well you do things too. So, as I said, try to get it in by the 28th. If you don't get it in by the 28th, I'll be a little bit flexible. I'll give you a couple of weeks after that. But again, I very strongly advise you, please do um, send in a draft. I think I've said that about 6 times now. So that's quite enough for me for one day. I'm going to finish the recording and just remains for me to say thanks very much. Hope you're doing well. Take it easy. Bye.